Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. Those who've listened before, you know that I like to say the not so great tennis podcast. But the founder of our podcast told me not to say that. So I'm being a rebel without a cause. Andy Fitzell. Don't say that. On the phone from Brookhaven City in Dallas. What a tennis place. Dave Anderson.
Hello.
First-time listeners, give us a quick description of Brookhaven. Courts on top of courts, baby.
Yeah, a lot of courts, a lot of tennis. I don't know if I could tell you the exact number. Clay, 16 indoor, a lot of outdoor hard courts, and in the last few years now, a lot of pickleball courts and a few padel courts as well. So massive place. We use a lot of the courts a lot of the time, so we're lucky we have them.
I've been fortunate to visit many times. Do you still have the Martina Navratilova court?
Yeah. The stadium court is still over there and nicely redone from the renovation. And that's one of my favorite courts. You know, I used to do a fair amount of teaching on that. I'm trying to stay out of the sun now, so I don't go over there as much. But yeah, it's a great court.
Tell us the story behind that. It was just built privately for her. I mean, it's off by itself.
Yeah, it's nestled over in a corner, and the story I've heard, whether true or not, I've tried to get confirmation on it, and it depends on who you talk to as to whether or not that is a valid story. But when Martina lived here in Dallas, she lived in Fort Worth, I think, but I think she hit some balls at Brookhaven back in the early days, and that court was built kind of to help isolate it and give it a little bit of privacy. But I need to find out if that's completely valid or not, because I have talked to several different people and it's about 50-50.
Yeah, I knew that she was in Fort Worth. Actually, at one point, a small town in upstate New York, Casanova, New York, she was married to the famous author Rita Mae Brown. That's a little trivia. Beautiful upstate New York. What I've done for tonight's podcast is honored some requests. I'm asked that we should go back to the beginning where we talked a little bit about this and that. Let me pick out one of these first. Let me go with, here we go. These are just from a folder. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by the late Stephen Covey. Let's just talk about each one briefly. I'll read it off and then you can give us a few comments. Yeah. Be proactive.
Well, yeah, that literally came out of my mouth I was talking to a mother of a young girl who had surgery. She's playing D1 tennis now, and she leaves this evening to go back to Kansas State. And I said the difference between this girl and most people is she not only does what she's told to do or asked to do, but she keeps her eyes open, looks around, and does the things that need to be done without even being told to do them. And whether it's that kind of day-to-day operation person or whether it's in your own journey, I mean, you have to be so proactive, seeking knowledge, information, be around good people to learn. I mean, never quit that. Always keep learning, always keep trying to seek people out. Proactivity, I think, separates people.
Take notes, rewrite notes. David and I worked out of the same office many years ago on a college campus. Mike Carter, who's been a guest of ours, who's a former student, and now he's been with USTA, I bet you 30 years.
Yeah.
I did the same thing with yourself, is just go in that office we had and just say, this is what could be done. You can just create the work, just look around, work hard, and then some. Number 2, I love this one. Begin with the end in mind.
Yeah, what a great comment. Just a great way to, I think, summarize what we try to do. And, because we've been through it, and you've been through it more than I, it is a little easier to do that for us. And I think it's more difficult from what we do with building tennis players and people and trying to prepare them for down the road. And beginning with the end in mind, to me, I do believe that it's one of the hardest concepts for people to grasp, because there is, this guy that spoke today, the author of the book Locker Room Power, he came and popped in at our club today and spoke, and he said, if Rafa Nadal or Roger Federer or Djokovic were standing in front of him and they asked the group, how many of you, want to do what we have done? And, all these hands would go up. But if people were given a firsthand look from the beginning stages and all of the work that had to be done for so many years without a guarantee, that a lot of those hands would probably start to go down. And beginning with the end in mind, and really there almost is no end. So it's kind of a trick question or a trick comment in a way, but I just think that it's so important to parents, to players, to coaches. We can't do short-term fixes for people.
I listen to a number of podcasts, tennis podcasts. It seems like almost everyone is talking about the top players in the world, which certainly is exciting. I think the backstory is more exciting than the story that's going on currently. Like say with the Olympics going on now, the Winter Olympics. Like how did people get there? It's how you start. No substitute for a good beginning. Vic Braden.
Yeah.
Here's another one from Stephen Covey. Put first things first.
I think you can look at that. I mean, you can interpret it a lot of different ways as to maybe what would have a payoff, a bigger payoff on something if you're going to invest time into a particular thing, a part of your game, a project. For me, putting first things first, when I read that book years ago, what I like to do is get really difficult things, the things I really don't look forward to doing perhaps. I like to get those done early in my day. I like to prioritize the tough tasks and then I'm more effective that way. I don't know if that really relates to putting first things first, but when it comes to what we do day in and day out with building tennis players, I mean, I think of grip, swing, body. When put the first things first is really grip, swing, body, in my opinion.
Yeah, you have to have a foundation. With Covey, number 1, urgent and important. Number 2, not urgent and important. 3, urgent and not important. 4, not urgent and not important. I think a lot of times that's where a lot of time goes. But to just prioritize, as far as player development, for sure. At the end of the day, have you practiced every shot? Have you practiced fitness? I mean, I should say, practice fitness. Have you really worked out? We'll fast on these. Number 4, think win-win. And I think it really, you could add another win. Think win-win-win. Go ahead and elaborate upon that if you would.
Well, I always use that in terms of relationships. I mean, if I win, you lose, it's not going to last. If you win, I lose, nothing lasts. And everything you want to strive for should be a win-win. I mean, and as a tennis teacher, I think as coaches, we want to strive for wins for tennis, for our students. And then, we as coaches, I think we need to not be very coach centric in that regard. And we shouldn't look for wins for ourselves in terms of that win-win-win at the top of the list. I think we got to win for tennis, and did a workshop last week, and I mean, it was a plea to everybody to just basically take their eyes off of what you said. We need to take more eyes off of the high performance type stuff, and we need to get back into meeting somebody in the grocery store and inviting them out to the tennis courts and having more free clinics and getting people out on the courts. And we gotta all as a group of people start trying to win for tennis first. And I think that's very, very important right now in the next 10, 15 years in the sport.
With the little kids, for example, say it's a 10 and under tournament. Obviously, the 10-year-old wants to win. The parents of the 10-year-old, they want to win. The coach of the 10-year-old, they want to win. Everybody wants to win. But you got to be very careful, especially in tennis, winning on the scoreboard. Little kid tennis and big kid tennis are two different sports. And even at the highest level, we have players that are one-dimensional. You got to take your hat off to them because they're such great physical specimens. Maybe not in size, but definitely in spirit. And fit. They really can compete, but are they? When they were younger, were they looking at winning skills? How many 10-year-olds are knocking overheads out of the sky? Stephen Covey, habit 5: seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Yeah. I mean, that's, that could be a deep talk that we could probably go into. I think as I've gotten older, I try to listen better, listen more, try to see things through the lenses of other people. I know an example of that for me is as I went through, the journey of raising kids into adults, I look back and I think that some ways I would give myself a good grade and other ways a bad grade. But I think that it really helps me, this particular seeking first to understand and then to be understood. It helps me, I think, when I remind myself of those things in dealing with parents, because love is blind a little bit, and like myself, everybody tends to make mistakes, and it's not always easy to see when it's your own flesh and blood and a lot of emotion. But then when you see it through their lenses, sometimes it's a little easier to come up with a plan of attack on how to approach it and maybe get the result done.
Well put. Listen to listen. It's much harder to listen in depth than it is to speak. It takes skill and emotional strength to listen within the framework of reference of another. Communicate first by listening, then by expressing. Habit 6: synergize, the habit of creative cooperation.
Well, I mean, synergizing, to use that word, I think they also, say collaborating. I think energy creates energy. And, you can put 10 people in a room and nothing will happen. And you can put, 3 people in a room and incredible things will happen. I think synergizing to me is getting people together, sharing ideas. That's exactly what this workshop was. It was a way to share really in the majority of it, a lot of the knowledge from the GreatBase. And with all of the area clubs that are owned by Invited, there were 35 to 45 pros there, and it was a very interactive. They were encouraged to be interactive, ask questions. So I think that was a good example of trying to synergize. To me, having consistent training with your staff. Again, I'm just relating this to the pro business, but there has to be constant synergizing and growth. Senior staff have to be always looking down to pull people up, mentor them. I think it's easy to get on an island and, nobody grows then. Even the most advanced teacher doesn't grow. I think you only grow through constantly synergizing, sharing ideas, gaining ideas. I mean, there's no other, you're one of the most incredible lifelong learners, Steve, around in the sport, and always trying to pick up this, that, or the other thing from anything and anyone. And I think that is such a key. The more people you interact with, hopefully you can get more and more ideas.
Oh, especially when it comes to communicating. If there's 100 ways to say things, you got to look for 101, and that 101st will be the one that clicks for at least one rare individual. You never know what's going to connect with someone. And then the last one, I use this all the time, but I would say the 7, I certainly use: be proactive, begin with the end in mind. I need to emphasize, put first things first more. Win. That's always the top of my list. But sharpen the saw. Obviously, we're in skill development. The habit of self-renewal. Why don't you comment on sharpen the saw?
Well, yeah, I can tell you that along the way, as a coach, I think you have to be extremely careful that, because you may not even know your saw needs sharpening. I mean, it's happened to everybody, including myself. And I think you have to constantly, you can never just go in and live the same day. I mean, I've been here 32 and a half years or something like that. And, I try to just not live the same day, even though so many things are similar each day, trying to acquire new skills, trying to constantly go back. And that I think is the beauty of mentoring is you're constantly teaching the things that you may already have pretty good mastery of, but through that, your saw is just going to remain incredibly sharp and has very little chance of gaining the rust from not using it. So I think it's just a huge part of it. And as a player, I think it comes down to, that Steph Curry, just go in and just work fundamentals all day, every day. I know Andy had that on his Instagram the other day, somebody reading an excerpt from Steph Curry's new book, and it was just basics every day, mentally, physically, emotionally, just everything. And every day we got to sharpen it. I don't think you can let it go too long, or you really run a risk of stagnation.
Repeat, basics. I tell a story. I was in Japan. I went to 5 different cities, and it was 8 hours in each city except for one. It was 16 hours. It was one day at each place. The last day was 2 days. So Kazuko Swamatsu, a world-class player, won Wimbledon doubles. I have to have our fact checker on that. Got as far as the semis in a major, retired at 24. So with her father, and he certainly speaks a little more English than I speak Japanese. And I remember him we went to the National Junior Championships and everybody knew him. But what he said to me in English is I was asking through an interpreter, how did your daughter become so good? And his niece was top 50 in the world. And I certainly could elaborate upon the answer, but his first answer was basics, repeat.
Yeah.
These handouts on the desk, the table in front of me. You can have a folder of them, and just on a rainy day, it's great to just hand them to one of your student assistants, someone who's say an older teenager, could be younger for that matter, and say, okay, why don't you speak in front of the group because you have to overcome stage fright. Mark Spann, who unfortunately is no longer with us, just passed away a month ago. Yeah, I used to tease Mark. His mother was a Wimbledon champion, and Spann, are you sure you weren't adopted? And but he was actually a very, very good player. But I remember throwing this piece of paper together, these notes in front of me, and I remember him saying that was his favorite handout. And so let's go through it. Awarenesses. Number one is court awareness. The dimensions of the court, height, length, width, the 4 airs, really, if you think of going wide to the left and wide to the right. So we say often three airs, net, long, and wide. What comes to your mind to just share a couple thoughts on court awareness?
Yeah, I mean, I love, on a personal level, taking players, coaches onto the court, sharing the realities, the optical illusions. Love the drill where we stand in the corner, point to a corner, and then have them close their eyes and try to line up the racket to the other singles corner. Did that this weekend with the coaches. I think that one thing creates so much awareness and impact. And then when you have people, stand at the baseline and seek out a cone or a target on the other side, and then, understanding that if the net weren't transparent, I mean, we would basically see a player from the waist. We wouldn't see him from the belly button down, the ribs down, if they're standing on the opposite baseline. So lots of things like that with opponent awareness or with court awareness that, I think that what comes to mind is just kids. I think kids jump on a hard court and they think it's a hard court, and they don't have really maybe the knowledge or the training and how to, but just evaluate the speed and surface of what they're playing on and how they can adjust accordingly. Because the hard court isn't just a hard court, even though they're becoming, very much carbon copy of each other. There are radically different hard courts.
Self-awareness, controlling your thoughts, using a mantra, having an objective, a purpose, breathing, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, focusing really on the contact point, self-awareness, knowing your goals. Are they logical? Are you positive? Are you negative? How does stroke production connect with strategy? Scoreboard awareness is on this as well, but I think that really brings self-awareness out, takes it out the window. But what are a few thoughts you have on self-awareness?
I read something recently by Jim Loehr that he thought that was probably one of the single greatest emotional intelligence, self-awareness factors in mental emotional skills. And, I think that having, playing the tennis court helps eliminate, like you said, playing the court, not the opponent so much. People taking care of themselves first. Vic Braden, make it easy on yourself first, difficult on the opponent second. And we often do just the opposite while we're out there. But I think it's a very critical thing. I think it's hard for younger people, not just kids, as you don't have much life experience, to gain true self-awareness, because I think it takes a lot of guts to be able to be honest with yourself, to be truly aware. But once you can have the guts to look inwardly and become truly aware, I think you can, you start playing and going through life with a lot more freedom.
It really all becomes one. Like what's the best air, long, and why? We always tease this: if you miss long, you don't have to pick the ball up. Missing the net, you have to pick the ball up. But from a technical standpoint, you just have to really get the racket face square at the hit. If you're missing wide to the left and wide to the right, just think about forehands and backhands. There's a lot of work to be done. But coming to the tennis court, so you go through court awareness, but it's going to be self-awareness that people realize. If they can realize that the tennis court does create optical problems, they stay on the court and they think it's gigantic. The mantra, bounce hit from Tim Galloway. You say bounce to yourself, and expelling air, saying the word hit, bounce hit, bounce hit. And then in between points, your eyes, your strings, only the ball, only the ball. Slowing yourself down. The next one, racket head awareness. Racket awareness. The angled racket face, angled racket path, the contact point. What you're doing with your own head is obviously self-awareness, body awareness. I'm always using that phrase. Racket head awareness. Where are the strings?
Yeah.
Where are the strings at the impact point? But go ahead. What comes to your mind with the racket awareness?
This kind of came up as well, the question, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it. About kids growing up at a very young age, and developing. I think the new buzzwords are sending and receiving. We used to call it hit and track or whatever, and but the awarenesses of their racket, if they develop greater racket head awareness through live ball type oriented stuff, versus somebody who has done a lot of fed ball. And so, I kind of answered the question saying I don't think it has to be either or, but there's going to be situations where in skill development that you have to crawl, walk, run, but it was an interesting question. It got me thinking. It got me thinking back to that podcast with the guy from UCLA, Richard Schmidt,
Programming,
on programming and block training and just random and kind of the research that was done on that. But what comments do you have on that? I'm curious.
Well, let me say this about Richard Schmidt. It's a Vic Braden video. You can find it on YouTube. That's really one of my favorite. He's with all the things that Vic did. With programming, we do a lot of reps. You can do too much of it. You have to get to the point where it's not always so controlled. You're not going to hit 100 forehands in a row. and you have to put it all together. But with racket head awareness, I think actually having kids play mini tennis with the wrong grips, they should be able to figure it out. Their game shouldn't just totally fall apart. It's really amazing exercise. Okay, let's see it rally play mini tennis with a Western grip. And even though it feels so bizarre, it's like asking someone to brush their teeth with their opposite hand. But sensory perception, knowing what the racket head's doing behind you, and how many times, and all of this adds up. The self-awareness to the body awareness. Then you go to racket awareness. How many times do you have to tell someone you have a horizontal pull on your forehand? So goes the backswing, so goes the rest of the swing. And sensory perception, when they're looking forward, do they really know what the racket is doing behind them? A magic trick from Braden is to go up to the fence and just trace the swing. And, so many kids have Vicky said, a really good forehand is about 15 feet in length. And most people have a 23-foot forehand because the racket goes back 4 feet. It's got to go forward another 4 feet. And then you get kids to change it in a technical setting, but then when they play, just let you know the brain has more than one set of programming. We know that people have a different motor programming most of the time when they are under stress, self-inflicted stress when they're competing, but they got to play like they practice and practice like they play. But, when you miss, and why you miss, strings don't lie. It's one thing to make a mistake and be high negative, not be low negative, but then right away you cheerlead yourself out of that. And it's like, okay, that's what I did with my racket. If you swing the right way, I mean, it is related. If the racket face is closed, degree for degree, inch for inch, as the racket face goes down, you feel like on a ground stroke on the forehand side, like you're dribbling a basketball behind you, you're pushing the palm down. But if you swing the right way, there is no net. And then you tell people, okay, look at the spin. Very few people hit true top-spin. Nadal broke the code. You hit high over the net. Sitting at home watching on TV, look like you certainly hitting the ball lower over the net. But the angle of the racket face, angle of the racket pass, the contact point, it's amazing to me that most 17, 18-year-olds don't know they still have the same contact points that they had when they were 10. That's just how the brain. Yeah. That's just how the brain works.
I always thought hitting a wall really helps. Hitting a true wall, I think, helps awareness for every level.
Well, there's some negatives about the wall. I mean, one, I think young boys, especially, they try to take that 2-ounce ball and knock the wall over. It can be the worst way to practice, but I think in a lot of ways get myself in trouble. But someone's better off just hitting the backboard than taking tennis lessons. If they're being told, invert the racket head, you get the contact point, turn the doorknob, and just all this witchcraft. But at least when you're hitting against the backboard, you want the ball to come straight back to you. It's very interesting, the sign of a misspent youth, someone who can play billiards well. I grew up playing ice hockey, and no one teaches you how to pass the puck off the boards, but you just learn exactly where to hit the puck, should hit the boards, the headman. You're going to 2-on-1 a defenseman and use the boards to get your fellow forward open. It's really interesting. But you just have to stop and think. And I don't get nervous when my students are playing, because they're going to get what they deserve. And if you miss, there's a reason why you miss. And are you going to just keep repeating that same error? The racket is an extension of one's hand. Palm guidance, that's a Braden expression. Knuckle guidance. Your palm go to your target. If you're hanging on your racket and you put your palm on your head, that's where your racket is. You put it on the back of your head, that's where the racket head is. How about spin? Ball awareness. Don't let the 2-ounce ball push you around. Imagine the ball is heavier than it actually is. Lift the ball with your body. Have shoulder play versus wrist play. You want to have it be a stroke versus a slap, tracking motion versus ballistic. The different types of spin, top spin, underspin, side spin, flat. You can have people play mini tennis and tell them just to vary the spin. So they actually, and that all comes back to racket awareness. So you're telling a kid to hit, just rally service line to service line, but let's see you mix up the spins. Can you actually play a ball flat? Now we know you have to swing up slightly, because when the ball hits the court, it converts into more spin generally, almost 95% of the time, 98% of the time. But to play a ball flat, that's where player will adjust the grip. Someone may have a semi-Western grip on the forehand side, but if you just say rally, let's racket as awareness, hit flat, then you can just call it, that's your flat grip, your spin grip, which grip should you have in the ready position of the racket centered. That comes back to racket awareness, is that most people, and you have to get to the ready position after every shot. Most people don't have the ready position. And then you look at people today, it's a safe bet. You go to a high-level Division I tennis match, men or women, and every racket head's not centered because each kid's waiting with an extreme grip.
Yeah.
But coming back to spin wins. We're not supposed to use the word win, but if you had to use one phrase, spin wins. And most kids are going for speed. Elements, let's talk about being aware of the elements. What comes to your mind with that?
Yeah, I think that, again, it seems like kids who played tennis, only one sport, and tennis has been their sole sport the entire life. I believe they don't pick up on things like this, not just the elements, but the awarenesses overall. Yeah, I think sun, wind, altitude, type of balls they're using, all of those things. I think there's very little thought that goes into it. You want to certainly have all of those things into account, and they're ever changing sometimes in the course of a match. And I just don't think anybody really gives a whole lot of thought to it until they get to a particular level. I think when they start taking ownership of their journey, they start to become aware of the little details like that and how they can impact the course of a match. But yeah, they're skills. They're all skills, and skills that aren't often brought up, and skills that are seldom worked on.
Well, over the decades, I've coached a lot of kids from Utah, and I have a little bit of fun and say, you kids from Utah, you don't have any street smarts because there's no streets in Utah. Well, there certainly are streets, but as far as wholesomeness, it just, I always tease the Mormons. Are they using electric shock? I mean, the kids are generally so well behaved. But you think of John McEnroe growing up, whether it was Grand Central Station, I think it was Penn Station. He's going to the Trinity School, and he's just taken in. He's just, he's well aware of his environment. You think element, people think, okay, the sun, the wind. When people play move up, move down, I always tell people I've never experienced a junior player being clever enough because they want to go up, is when they do win and they move up, or even if they move down and want to move up from that next round, are they even thinking about where the wind is, where the sun is? But it's a senior player who will sometimes even ask, well, do we spin for side? Junior players, they're just, unfortunately, many, many times is that they don't know until they're not even playing anymore. Their competitive days are behind them unless they've continued to play social adult tennis or age group tennis. But here's another one, score awareness.
I actually, Jenna, my wife, who took up tennis back in COVID, we argue a lot about good arguments, not bad ones, about tennis. And, I'll say something related to like score awareness, and she said it shouldn't matter. It's just another point. It's one point. You can't think like that. And I said, well, watch what happens. So, she's right. I'm right, I think, in these cases. I think that, you got to get to the point where the scoreboard is really not even in your mind. But then there's certainly times where, I think that you can't back off the ball. I think you got to not back off the ball, but you might be a little more conservative with your targets in terms of, big swings to good aggressive swings to fat targets on the court. And, I think that Roger Federer quote, that many times there's nothing wrong with a particular player out there on the tour, but they're going for great shots from bad position. And he said he felt like he went for great shots from great positions. And so again, it kind of that self-awareness, right? And what are you doing well on that day? And trying not do the things you're doing poorly on the biggest points of the match. Yeah,
I thought
very important though. Go ahead.
I thought you and your wife argued where she takes the stand that she married bad, and you take the stand that she won the lottery. That's what I thought the argument
Yeah.
was.
Speaking of tomorrow,
You could buy a lottery ticket.
38 years. 38 years tomorrow. So shout out to her for sticking it out.
38 years. I was there when you got married.
Yeah, you were.
76. That's what you're supposed to say. Lou Holtz. You should tell people, yeah, we've been married 76 years, 38 for her and 38 for me. No, congratulations. That's a great run. And maybe it's going to work out.
Seems like it might.
So we got court awareness, self-awareness, racket, body awareness, ball awareness, court awareness, where you are in the tennis court. Make sure that's on this piece of paper, that the position where you are in the court. Score awareness element. And now the last one, and most importantly, it's last, is your opponent awareness. Vic Braden's wife used to say, don't do that, Vic. Vic used to pretend he'd fold his finger and just put his knuckle in his nose and pretending he's picking his nose. And then he'd be, with his other hand, waving the racket and moving it. The racket would be hanging downward. You'd just be swinging like a pendulum. He said, just think of your opponent like they're doing this. There's only one ball and you have it. The ball is on your side. And, it's amazing. I tease people, I go, are you playing Alcaraz today? We have some upcoming college tennis matches. Ave Maria University, beautiful Ave Maria, Florida. And I told the boys the other day, I said, I don't think anyone's going to be playing Alcaraz or center. Just check out who's on the other side. So what comes to your mind with your opponent?
Yeah, I think back to that podcast we did with Matt Knoll, when he was coaching at Baylor and had some of the best players in college tennis, and he used the phrase "stupid errors." His words. He said they were just stupid mistakes, and he said a similar thing. He was dealing with kids who were going deep in junior Grand Slams. That's the kind of level he was dealing with. But he said, hey, they're not playing against Sampras or Becker or Agassi. Opponent awareness, I think, even in watching TV and watching pro tennis matches, I don't think people do a great job of it. I think that as you get up to higher levels, it certainly becomes a little bit better skill set for some. But, when people are breaking down on a particular side, I don't necessarily players just continuing to hammer it until it completely crushes. And in junior tennis, I think that in younger age groups, sometimes people don't realize if they're playing a lefty or righty, anything like that, whether the opponent's tired, cranky, on the verge of tanking. I think all of those things literally are not even able to be picked up on. And I think when people are panicky and nervous, they're watching a tennis match that they're playing, kind of like driving in a rainstorm without windshield wipers. They're driving, but they just don't have any really clear picture of what's going on.
John Wooden. This is great John Woodenism. Never try to be better than your opponent. The contest is with yourself. Jim Verdick, all our pillars. Just try to get 1% better. Let's move on. But before we do that, the gentleman who came to visit your place from South Africa, the name of his book and his surname, full name, actually?
David Samuel, a South African by birth, and spent 20 plus years, in England, as I think been out on the tour primarily as a touring coach, worked for the LTA for the past 35-ish years. Yeah, his book, Locker Room Power. It's a good book. It's an easy read. It's available on Amazon as well as a couple other areas you can get it, but I'm early on in it. Just got a copy. He, great guy, very dynamic speaker, truthful speaker. You could tell it in the time he spoke.
You have to get back to us. Let us know if there's a way we could listen to him. I'm sure he's on a podcast or two.
Yeah, I think he has 250 episodes currently out on a podcast that he does called Locker Room Power. So check it out.
All right, Locker Room Power. That's a great title. With the locker room, a lot of times a tennis player, they have dreams of being a pro. We always say college tennis is a goal, pro tennis is a dream. Mom and dad, your kid has never been in a locker room. They have to get to college before they're in a locker room. And that's really amazing. What happens in the locker room is sacred. And I know growing up as a little kid, when you're tiny, tight playing hockey, the parents are in the room tying the skates, but then they're told to leave with, but no, great title. I remember Billy and Leon Lip. They used to come to the program we had for tennis teachers to get a degree. And they were both umpires, and they were both big time umpires, and they trained the umpires, and they had, called all the matches. And actually, when one of our students, Steve Ulrich, he went on to be one of the best. And he initially went through the training that we had at Tennis Tech. But they said that McEnroe knew everything. He was so aware of what was going on. And, there's just so many sayings. Like, there's three types of people. Those people make it happen. Those people who at least know it happened. And the biggest group is people have no idea what happened. Well, let's move on to another handout. You've already mentioned his name, Jim Loehr.
Yeah.
He used to, which I had set up at one point where over a 10-year period, we tried to bring in people like Jim Loehr every other year. So it's a 2-year program. Each student would get a chance to, experience sitting in on his lectures live. But then we had all these audio tapes and then later books. But this is something that Jim put on, I think it was 1984. You get this on YouTube as well. Jim Loehr's 12 mental toughness concepts. And there's things that one can do physically to be better mentally and emotionally. So I'll read one off again on this, and then you can make some comments. But let's start with eye control.
Yeah, before I go into that was one of my favorite handouts when I was a student, and then serving as a whatever it was I did afterwards. But yeah, eye control. I love the video of the animals in the wild kingdom and likening those to the eyes of the competitors. To me, eye control, wandering eyes equal wandering mind. I think as I've gone through the sport as a coach, I've found that different brain types, it serves them well. It's not that they're losing control of their eyes, but they're people who do have a tendency to scan a little bit more. Others are more prone to really needing to keep it right on the court. But boy, the person I think of more than anybody with eye control is Jimmy Connors. His eyes look like a shark at a shipwreck at certain moments, just looking to feast. And they displayed a lot about what was inside of the guy.
Oh, that's great. Rituals.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time on this. And, when I think of rituals, give Dr. Bob Neff credit. He called them beepers, between point rituals, BPRs, and we just used to call them beepers. And I think a pre-serve ritual, pre-return ritual, pre-match ritual, post-match ritual, between point rituals, changeover rituals. To me, rituals are nothing more than just another part of our life, how we get out of bed every day, all of those kind of things. And I think great athletes are very ritualistic, and the legends become very ritualistic from the time they get up to the time they go to sleep. But on the court, I think all of those need work.
So the acronym, it's beepers. What's that stand for?
Yeah, just between point ritual.
Between.
Okay. Yeah, and Bob Neff came up with that.
Next one is pace.
Yeah, establishing the pace of a match. I think that's a little bit of an art form. Again, I think that if you grow up playing baseball at any level, where it becomes not coach pitch, but you're playing against actual pitchers, and that the batter and the pitcher always have a dance they do, and pitcher has his ritual, the batter has his ritual, and if the batter is in ready to hit and the pitcher is taking too long, the batter steps out. And I think that tennis is kind of the same. I mean, we have to play to the reasonable pace of the server, but people utilizing the time they need to be ready to peak perform, point in and point out. And I think that, it's again, kind of a skill set, I think, that people have to be aware of and then go to work on. I think none of this stuff seems important to players in junior tennis often. And by the time they realize all of it is important, their window in junior tennis anyways is kind of closed. They have to really appreciate it.
I think that's great. You said that the batter and the pitcher, like say, for example, Sampras was the pitcher and Agassi was the batter. I didn't really even like baseball. And I've told a story on this podcast before where I just wanted to work on my stick handling and shooting in the driveway and asked my mother at a young age, can I not play baseball? And she said, it's un-American not to play baseball. But back in the day, I mean, in our backyard, we called it a baseball diamond, but it was for wiffle ball. But the bases were just worn out because everybody played outside. And across the street, our neighbors had a hockey rink. And so it's really interesting. But yeah, don't rush. Don't play too fast. The pace. The next, so eye control is 1, rituals 2, pace is 3. Breathing, something you can do physically to be better mentally and emotionally. A few comments on that.
Yeah, I did. The person who does our Instagram, we did a little tennis tip for that today. Breath work. Some people stumble upon it naturally, and I think that breathing out when you hit the ball. That's why I love the bounce hit drill as well. To actually, verbally say hit or say the word one, and forces people to make a sound. I mean, so many people we deal with as coaches are just scared to even make a sound when they hit a ball. And at the Dallas Open this week, when you're court level, everybody's breathing. Some are grunting, some are more just strong exhaling pattern. But when I think of breathing, I think of it on that end, and then I think of it really as it relates to between points. Part of the beeper, part of the between point ritual has to be mastering breath work to try to regulate your heart rate and keep it down and keep your body chemistry in line. And because when you get too much pumping, the fine motor skills become very difficult to navigate.
No, thanks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 and 6 are, you can certainly cover both these. High positive intensity, and I love Loehr, confident fighter image.
Yeah, high positive intensity. I think we spoke about what that looks like several weeks back. I can't remember exactly when, but it's been an interesting thing trying to learn about that and how it is manufactured in each player. I think that when you mention high positive intensity to kids, they associate it with, as long as they're running, grunting, doing that. But really it could be a state that looks totally different in one player to the next. And trying to get that out of people, recognize what it means for them, but there are characteristics of what it looks like in all players in our sport. And, the footwork is very active, and the move, it's usually very reflected in the movement. There's an inner calm, even though they're very, very intense and highly positive. I mean, you can be highly negative and intense, and it's a very fine line. The confident fighter image, I mean, that was again attached to the tip we gave today. It just had to do with body language. We talked about the 3 B's: body language, breathing, and belief. And the body language, I mean, so many players on the court, their will just, the person on the other side doesn't really feel anything. And you should have that body language sending a message at all times. I mean, Jimmy Connors, Leighton Hewitt, Rafa, even Sampras in his own way. I think, even though he was a very quiet guy on the court, I think he sent a message. Very important qualities.
Jim Loehr grew up a baseball player from Colorado, played tennis, obviously. And because of his baseball, had a really good serve. With Jim, that tape 1984, if you're a Connors fan, Connors hit the ball so well. He could have improved his serve a little bit with a toss out to the left as a left-hander. It's really fun to look at. So then you already touched upon this. The next one, you have to combine that confident fighter image intensity with, from Wooden's triangle, pyramid of success, poise, being relaxed and calm. while you're intense. Why don't you comment on that?
I think that is a difficult combination for all athletes to find, having that inner calm. And, I remember mental toughness being diagrammed. You can imagine a bell-shaped curve, and at the top of it was this, kind of gentle little plateau at the top that went down and on each side, and that being referred to as ideal performance state. And on the left of it, as you're climbing up to get there, there was a state of under arousal. And then if you go a little too far in terms of getting pumped up, then there's over arousal. And I think learning to get enough juice. I always, when I watch boxing or anything like that, and the boxer comes out of the corner after sitting on a chair, and they're always doing kind of an aggressive breathing pattern to stimulate, and yet they're calm. And so I think it's this weird balancing act that one has to try to figure out what works for them. But again, I think it really ties into breath work to be able to master it and find that spot.
Very good. Managing mistakes.
Tough. But if you don't manage your mistakes will manage you. Past is gone. It's gone. I think understanding the math in the sport really helps. The math in terms of the technique, like you spoke about earlier, where you're missing, why you're missing. I think that really helps you. You can only coach one to coach oneself. And if you're able to get that through to a player, then the independence is going to help them manage mistakes better. I'm not a huge fan of on-court coaching. I hate to see players looking to the sides all the time. I may be in the minority there, but I wish it would go away, because I think the more strength and more independent, the more knowledge you can get to people, I think they manage mistakes better. And obviously it ties in with all of the other things, rituals, all of that, awareness, everything. But so many times people just keep repeating errors, like you said, and it often is a technical flaw as to why it's happening.
When you make the mistake, look right at it. You look away from it. It's denial. Be high negative initially. Go through the process, mistake correction. But this is out of the horse's mouth with Loehr. Managing mistakes, single most challenging thing to deal with. Clear the mistake as quickly as possible, physically and mentally. Play in the here and now. Dwelling on mistakes makes the ideal performance state impossible. The more involved with mistakes, the more difficult it will become in time emotionally. Take time to clear it from your head and move on to the next point. Just those two words, move on. Look the same whether you're winning or you're losing. Visualize dealing with mistakes in a positive manner. I know Jim was very grateful for the podcast or two that we devoted to him. We actually then interviewed him. Certainly think he should be in the Tennis Hall of Fame. But he used to have people, you feed a forehand volley and say, hit the worst forehand volley possible. And the kids have some fun with it. And then don't look like a loser. I mean, I think that term, unforced error, okay, that's a forced error and that's an unforced error. You could say, well, that's a winner and then that's a loser. Here's one that ties in with, coming back to awareness, is body awareness, the body language, but negative self-talk. Comment on that.
Yeah, negative self-talk. I think it's a killer, right? I mean, I wish we could mic kids up. I mean, I've done it with these mics that we do our social media with. I've mic kids up on match play. They're usually pretty good for the initial part of the match, but eventually it gets into crunch time, and then you just start hearing it, and it's just verbal diarrhea, and it takes you down. I mean, that dialogue that we have with ourselves, it's either helping or hurting. I love the term mental vitamin that I think I stole or borrowed from you many years ago, and mental junk food. It has a profound effect on performance. And I think that it's interesting because, there's outward self-talk, and that's the easy kind to determine. But I think that there are many kids who are, look the part, and they're very stoic, and they do everything right. But but their self-talk's just inwardly negative, whether it's fear or anxiety, and those are really challenging ones, I think, to help. I really enjoy trying to get those people out of the trenches that they're in.
Yeah, we always tell people they do so well with communicating with their partner. Their partner misses a shot and they don't say, "I'm never playing with you again." They'll say, "No
Yeah.
problem, right here, we got it." But the way they talk to themselves, overt, covert, where it's, the overt's audible, then covert's where they're internalizing. You can just see it typically, but slap yourself on the thigh. You're going to make mistakes. Federer obviously got to the point where he overcame his teenage years and you missed by 20 feet. You just look right at it and you don't act surprised. When you miss a shot, don't act surprised. I mean, it's pet peeve number one for me. When a kid misses a shot, they look at the racket. The racket's got nothing to do with it. Braden used to say it's the toad on the end of the racket. Let's go with this one. You can link these together too, of the dozen. And these are physical, the enjoyment and the positive attitude. It's kind of a flip of the negative self-talk.
Yeah. This guy, David Thamel, talked about it today. He brought up one of the quotes that, we've talked about here, and Jimmy Connors: the greatest thing in life is playing tennis and winning. Second greatest thing is playing tennis and losing. That may not be verbatim, but you got to just enjoy the battle. And it is a privilege to be out there moving around and being in a battle and getting to, run on a court and hit balls. And it's funny because more so now than in recent decades of coaching, as the level 2 nationals and level 1 nationals approach, especially, I think the kids are playing the match, and it's, we're still in practice on Tuesday or Wednesday, and they don't even leave till Friday. The anxiety level, they're all, you can just feel their minds are going worst case scenario already. I don't think there's the sense of enjoyment where it's critical. I remember Dr. Loehr saying that in the office, that was, you can have everything else, but the missing, he didn't use these words, just how I interpreted it, that, if you go to make a chocolate chip cookie, stir it up, do everything right, and put it in the oven, and then you forgot to put chocolate chip in, you still have a cookie. But without the chocolate chip, it's not a chocolate chip cookie. And I think that the enjoyment, not being present, that loving the battle, ideal performance state is almost elusive. And, I think that the positivity is kind of a byproduct of enjoying the battle.
The 12th one is rack it up. Rack it up, body language up. Don't let the racket, when you're in between points. And that's really how Larry got his start, is he studied what players do in between points, which is 70%, give or take, 70% of the match. Rack it up, chin up, shoulders up. And it all ties together, the confident fighter image. It says right here, in order to be a winner, you have to think like a winner. You have to look like a winner. It's easy to think negatively. Thinking positively takes work. Let's move on, but Jim Loehr, he does have with these 12, you rate yourself 1 through 5. Eyes controlled, ritual, serve, return, and on, winning pace, breathing, high positive intensity, confident fighter image. You have to rate yourself. The negative self-talk, rack it up. Jim Loehr, though, I love the battle. Here's one that was in this file as well. 100 terms. I'll just give you 2. 21, 6 feet, 1 degree. If you change, the ball comes out of a ball machine at sea level. This is a Bradenism. Ball comes out of a ball machine at sea level at 30 miles per hour. You change the racket face by 1 degree, the ball goes 6 feet further. Generally, when people miss a volley, it's because the racket face is open. A true continental grip opens the racket face at a 45-degree angle. And then most people, they don't have their elbows raised, elbows out when they hit a volley. But now people don't even volley. They don't even volley. And now certainly with the new rackets are not new, been around for a long time now. That is another element for the ball to go a little further out. Here's one too. Just check off quickly. There's so many of these. 89 singles half volley and a doubles half volley. Now it's tough to watch. I mean, I was watching the uh, the NCAA women's final, semifinals, and final. I didn't see much of either, but I did watch a little bit of both. More of one semi. These big, strong athletes playing one up, one back doubles, and I'm sure the men this upcoming week will be doing the same. The matches are out in Waco and at Baylor and Dallas, SMU. But if you're playing a singles half volley, for the most part, what you should do is have the racket track outward where you make the half volley an approach shot, and you're looking for depth. But in high level doubles, like McEnroe was so good at that, is be soft hands and a half volley. He'd bring the racket up like he was hitting a topspin lob, so the ball would dip over the net and go at his opponent's feet. But just terms like that. Here's something: Lombardi, the great football coach, he was misinterpreted. For example, winning's not everything; it's the only thing. But here's a paragraph from Lombardi. Every time a football player goes to play his trade, he's got to play from the ground up, from the soles of his feet right up to his head. Every inch of him has to play. Some guys play better with their heads. That's okay. You've got to be smart to be number one in any business. But more importantly, you've got to play with your heart, with every fiber of your body. If you're lucky enough to find a guy with a lot of head and a lot of heart, he's never going to come off the field second. And that's where Lombardi was misinterpreted as far as winning. You put forth, you control your attitude and you control your efforts. You're a winner. Coming back to locker room power. So parents listening, your kid has got to be good on the track. They've got to be good in the gym. They got to be good on the tennis court. Obviously, first and foremost, they got to be good in the classroom. But college coaches want a kid who's going to be good in the locker room. Do they have any empathy for their teammates? Do they have a sense of humor? Can they talk? And a lot of tennis kids growing up, mom and dad, they don't learn to be a teammate. They don't learn to be a teammate. I got a couple more here. This is on our website. Well, actually, the podcast. John Nienagel's book. Excuse me, it's not on our website, but the article that went all the way to the cover of Tennis Magazine by Joel Trucker and Vic Braden. And I think we have 3 or 4 podcasts dedicated to Vic, and people can listen to Bradenism throughout any of our podcasts. The extroverts, page 45 and 46, I have in front of me. And say, for example, if indeed center is an ISTP, the athletic artisan, artful with machines and tools, which offer an outlet for self-expression, his tools, a tennis racket, lives for action and excitement. One thing he did is in Italian, the Winter Olympics are in Italy. He was asked to carry the flag, and he said, "No, thanks, I have to practice." He's got to make up for that loss to Djokovic. Interested in sports and business, witty, but usually not wordy. Friendly and generous to peers, fine motor skills. If Alcaraz, for example, ESTP, we could very quickly go through what the letters stand for. The mother, daughter in the 50s, Myers-Briggs, who put this together, it's used still on every college campus or almost every college campus for job placement. The energetic promoter, supreme realist, master manipulator, entrepreneur, promoter, thrives on excitement, socially sophisticated, good-natured, tolerant, body conscious, fine motor skilled. So the E is for extrovert, the I is for introvert, N is for intuitive. The letter I has already been used for introvert. So the second category, you're either sensate in the moment or intuitive, you're thinking down the road. Feeler or thinker, you're actually both. One is your primary, one's your secondary. Feelers can think and thinkers can feel. And then you're either a P, a perceiver, or J, a judger. And it's a great tool just to know more about yourself. Doesn't put anybody in a box. But then once you know what your brain type is, you work towards being the opposite. So the extroverts need to try to be introverted. The introverts try to be extroverted. A P, for example, is very flexible, easygoing. They need to add structure to their life. It's very interesting, the parenting. Nagel has a book to brain type a child. But it's really interesting to find out the brain type of parents. Usually opposites attract. But typically a successful athlete, even if their person's not a J, in other words, someone who has structure, there's a plan for the day, they become that. Now you hear the term ENTP for Federer, a planner, imaginative, quick, ingenious, resourceful, alert to all possibilities, enjoys complexity, enthusiastic, competent, outspoken, master of the one-upmanship, funny, comedic, intellectual, abstraction, skilled. Might as well read Braden's while we're on the Pied Piper, the ENFP. My mother was an ENFP. Enthusiastic, imaginative, sees possibilities in everything, spontaneous, easily bored with repetition. Our boy Andy Fitzell, ENFP, he doesn't want to go to court 12 and teach the same thing day in and day out. Relies on ability to improvise, problem solver, promoter, verbally skilled. But yeah, that's a great tool, the brain typing. I would definitely use that article. That article has a fun 20-question quiz. Here's a long quiz. This was in the file. I hadn't seen this in a long time. It's a hard copy. Tennis Intelligence Applied. That's one course we have online. And there's a test. David, why don't you give me a number 1 through 220, 250 questions. Give me a number, Dave.
Number 10.
Number 10. Your wife's a 10. Man, did she marry bad. Here we go. A tennis teacher should base his or her teaching on friendship, a philosophy, physics, or style. What do you think, Anderson?
Well, definitely style.
Is that
I'm gonna go with physics.
I thought you meant hairstyle.
Yeah, hairstyle. I definitely base my career on copying hairstyle.
Dave came to Ave Maria to help us with a workshop, and he had a funny line. I have to talk to my therapist.
My therapist, that's right.
Anderson, the Lord works in mysterious ways. He gave me such a hard time when I was losing my hair, and now he's as bald as an eagle. But yeah, the Tennis Intelligence Applied. I have to pat myself on the back. I still like the title of that course. Here's another one that was in the folder. I don't know if you've had success with this. I know you have and we've shared it on our social media, and you should share it on a regular basis. Now you have it on a digital platform, but not you. I'm talking about your handbook that you give out to players when they start your program. But this came from Loehr. Daily monitoring weekly chart. It's one piece of paper, front and back, and we were never successful with this. I used to, we've had so many coaches send us players, and we used to give out a notebook and used to, the journal and check it each day. But our standards lower because we just got beat up because no one was doing it. No one was journaling. No one had a notebook. No one went home and wrote things down. Your parents are giving you a gift. 1, 2, 3. At least, I say get a ring binder, get the old-fashioned notebook paper, date the one piece of paper. You can come back to it, date the paper, write down 3 things. Even if you've heard one thing over and over again, what was 3 things from that day that's going to help with reflective thought for you to be better? But on this daily monitoring chart, I'll read some things off, but you've been doing this a long time. I mean, you're 40 years plus in this thing. Have you had much success using a daily monitoring chart?
Early on, early on in the, I think that coachability was at a higher point, and but we're going back into the 80s, maybe the early 90s, but it shifted hard and quick with that kind of stuff. Now I could tell you offhand the number of kids who I think do a good job of journaling, and the in-depth journaling we have in our academy manual, none of them do. So I think I told you, like with technical things, and even just anything with their game, I've told kids that are old enough to have an iPhone now, or a phone, I tell them to point, you can reverse the camera so it faces you, and just talk to it and say, here's what my day was, here's what I learned, boom, 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 and then put it in an album. on their phone, that says my tennis game. So they can kind of blurt it out in 15 seconds. And so I'm trying to adapt. I don't know if it's more effective, less effective, or even whatever it is, but trying to get them to do both, work in any way I can to get them to remember.
I get these junior players. We're working with college players as well, so they're carrying these big bags around. So beautiful day, Saturday morning. What do we do? We say, okay, everybody in the classroom. In the first 40 minutes, we played Funny Funny Tape, 1975, one take, big braid, and go for a winner on doubles. Gave everybody a 5-minute break. Came in, watched the tape that was almost the same exact length. And that was our boy, Tap Tap, Craig Tiley. 7 years in Tibet, 7 years in Tyler, Texas, 9 out of 10 Christmases hanging out with us. And he has an excellent tape, too, actually. I think it was when he first won the Big Ten. That was a bonus from the athletic department, as they made a tape and he was allowed to sell it. And both of them were very, very well done. But so anyway, we said, okay, Roger Federer Day is 24 hours off. You stop playing, you stop practicing Saturday at 1 p.m. By the next Sunday, the very next day at 1:00, you've had 24 hours off. So he said, all right, you have the rest of the Saturday, rest of the Sunday. Just let us know, bank hours. Let us know how many hours you practice. It's all up to you. And a couple of kids did come out, put a little more time in, but not one person let the coach know. Bank hours. But quickly, I'll just read through this, the front page. Academic, total hours in school, total homework hours. This is Loehr, grading yourself, academic effort, A through F. Extra reading. You're a scholar if you're reading a book that you don't have to read. Physical, stretching, yes or no, number of times. Diet, rate yourself A through F. Number of meals, number of hours of sleep, time to bed, time up, number of glasses of water. Sugar hits, number of times that you've had sugar. You can just do all this on one piece of paper. Next is physical training, endurance work, time. Strength work, time. Speed work, time. Mood control, positive intensity, positive attitude, confident player image, concentration, confidence, motivation, fun factor. You rate yourself A through F. And on the second page, drill work. One thing with students we work with, because we do technique and first impressions are everlasting. And I love to give kids a choice. I say, okay, 10 and 10 or 8 would be great. You feed your partner 8 balls, they feed you 8 balls. Could be 12 and 12, doesn't matter. Your choice. And then too many times people just do static balances, move, do a combination of shots. But drill work, practice match time, lesson group training, lesson private, all training time, tournament match play, number of phone calls made, number of phone calls that you make to play matches. And actually in America, I don't think it would work today, but if you were lucky, you'd get 1 hour lesson a week and you just called people to play. It was so great for young juniors to call up an adult. So number of self-arranged sets and matches. And then you keep track of your opponent's name, the set scores, singles and doubles. This is very important. Did you play up a level, down a level, or even? Remember the late Andy Brandy used to say, if you were to play up 25%, even 50%, down 25%, no one wants to play down. You play with a lesser player and put the ball in a dime, never miss. And then with each match, you rate your performance with body language, A through F. That's one that was in the file. Another one quickly is the 7 concepts of single strategy. Tennis Intelligence Applied, our long course. We have 5 courses, the one that's 25 hours. Each concept, red, yellow, green, DNO, percentage post, percentage line, short ball range, good volume position, ideal volume position, hold the line. Each one is explained on the court and then in the classroom. We have a young player here from Canada. It's, you went with me the first time I went. That was 33 years ago. And there's so many kids at this club, Richmond Hill in Ontario. They hit the ball well. It's gone from Richard Hernandez to Miran Mann, Patrick Jeffrion, 3 directors, all working the same curriculum. And kids hit the ball really well. and they have quite a few kids that are top 10 in Canada. But, they'll run a 2-hour practice, and then, the coaches stay on the court to run another 2-hour practice. They have to deal with old man Winter and ask them questions. And, everyone should be like the point guard who's calling out the play, or the quarterback. You go to the huddle. I could do this another time. What was in the article, what was in this one folder, I'll come back to this, but 2 articles by Frank DeFord, one in 1961, Welby Van Horn, The Right Way to Begin, one in 1974, it's on Vic Braden, Tennis is in the Stone Ages. So much of the GreatBase has, the influence from Braden to Van Horn is very deep. One thing I had, but old man, I had it at my fingertips, but I think it was 1,543 mind vitamins. And it was, if you remember that, one person started it, and it was just ongoing. It was in our office, and again, coming back to the late Mark Spann, great guy. I don't know if that was into the 1,543 was, because it wouldn't really be a mind vitamin. It'd be more like a locker room chip.
Yeah.
Spann, are you sure you weren't adopted? And he would get a chuckle out of it. It's like a reminder, hey, your mom won Wimbledon. You can't flub a volley like that. Let me put a little more pressure on you. But that's where locker room humor, in ice hockey, you platoon, because it's such an anaerobic sport. You play 45 seconds, approximately, you come off, you sit on the bench, you look straight ahead, and then, you might get a pat on the back, but you make a mistake, you're just going to hear it right there. It just breeds toughness. You're just told constantly. But on mind vitamins, Braden's favorite mind vitamin is take responsibility for yourself. I like this one, unknown. I don't know where I picked this up. I like to be able to give credit where credit's due. Responsibility means your ability to respond. This has been mentioned many times. Lou Holtz, win. What's important now? One thing I had written down as well for today is, in listening to podcasts, Andy Fitzell is telling me to listen to Changeover. And it's fun to listen to these two tennis junkies like ourselves. They're talking about the future level matches, the challenger level matches. And they're very honest, and they come around to grips. And they basically pretty much say, we don't know grips. Andy Roddick, he said on his podcast, I'm from Nebraska, I don't do grips. But it's very interesting to listen to these different podcasts. They listen to Patrick Gibson. He's been, he was number one in every age group. We have clips of him, short videos. And he hit the ball really well left-handed. One of the reasons was he always wanted to play. He always wanted to compete. And many times, he was around and we didn't have anybody his level to play. It's like, no problem. You play left-handed. Let's make it a challenge. And he's asked at the end, somebody that you and I coached years ago, he doesn't remember it though, Daniel Kiernan. He has a podcast, Control the Controllables. And at the end, it's pretty clever. He says, okay, pass the baton. Who would you like us to interview? Who would you recommend? And Patrick listened to him, and he recommended Tennis Sangren. And Sangren is a smart guy, tennis smarts. Jack Sock did not like playing at the futures level, challenger level. And he would tank. He'd get in a bad mood, and he would just throw in the towel. I remember I wasn't coaching him at all, but I was traveling with him because he was playing with Ross and Krajicek. And I said, you got to be so careful when that guy tanks. And he goes, yeah, I know, because he plays exactly the same. And it was true. Even though he's tanking, he still played the same way. But I remember him playing Stevie Johnson. This was after Stevie had dominated college tennis. And I don't know if tennis was thinking about it, or he was stating the pros. Most likely he was. It's interesting when you talk to someone, I guess Tennis Sangren and Stevie Johnson, they're both basically about the same age. I'm sure they played too many times to count in juniors and in college, Tennessee and USC. But I remember I was there for the beginning of the tournament. It was a playoff for the Australian wildcard. And Krajicek had lost, so we're driving back to Florida. But I was back in time to watch the final. Stevie Johnson, he didn't even need to play it. He forgot to sign up for the Australian Open, so he had to show up and play the wild card. to get in. I can digress and go with Stevie Johnson. I think one of the reasons he was a winner is that everybody was meeting, the coaches, trainers, and the players. You went in this nice room at that Peachtree facility in Atlanta, and there's these really big chocolate chip cookies, and they're passing them around, and everybody said no, no, no. And Stevie Johnson came in late, and he took two. But anyway, it went 5 sets, but I remember Sanger just saying, no, I'm going to go 2 to his forehand, 1 to his backhand. 2 to his forehand, 1 to his backhand. Because Stevie, at one time, I mean, he was hitting underspin because he just was struggling so much. It's amazing someone dominated college tennis like that. He wasn't really confident on the backhand side. But what happened is that, Sangren, his inability from the service line in, he ended up losing in 5. He would have won it in 3. Yeah, if it would, so anyway, the way the match unfolded. But anyways, Patrick was asked who would he want to interview. He said Tennis Sangren. I had heard Tennis one time say on a podcast, what would you do to improve tennis? And he talked about everybody playing with a wooden racket. So that's changeover. And then there's the Tennis Insider Club. And this gentleman, Jason Stacy, I think he pretty much gives a master class. He's a manager for Sabalenka. And his background is from martial arts, and he's a massage therapist. Works with strength and speed, but that's really interesting. And I was listening to Jim Curry. He's talking about basic tennis instruction, and it's very refreshing. He says, "Well, my backhand." I listened to him talk about his backhand. I don't think I've ever heard him say, "Well, the left hand was so far underneath." People just referred to it as a baseball swing, and he became number 1 player in the world. But I spent a lot of time with, I shouldn't say a lot of time, but certainly at the time, it seemed like a lot of time where his niece and nephew were coming out, his sister Audra. And when he lost his first match, his sister is only 2 years older. That was not part of the podcast. I just remember him, as I used to say to her, give us a Jim Courier story. And say, the first time he lost, he cried for 3 days in a row. We're here with these college kids. They're great kids. It's so social. It's not competitive at this point. And, Bill Tilden, you can measure a champion by how they respond to defeat. And they played, the gals played a match, and, there's been some progress, but, they lost the match, but 10 minutes afterwards, they were over it. It was, I got one last thing I can end with is, had an adult player come to visit. Just, actually, he went to a memorial. Mark Spann, they had one in South Africa, and they had one in Philadelphia. I guess through that, he had heard my name, and then he went to the podcast, and he listened to, because Mark Spann was interviewed on a podcast, and so he's in the area in Naples. I said, well, just come on out. Well, he's just falling in love with tennis now. So big guy, 6'3", played basketball and golf. So it's always interesting to be where you can relate to other sports. So I asked him, I said, do you have any kids? And he says, yeah, I got a daughter 4 and a daughter 6. So we have this young 8-year-old who spent a lot of time with us. So I said, I filmed the 8-year-old hitting right-handed, left-handed. And then I based the whole lesson how he should teach his kids. Use trickery from Vandermeer, set up the garage, the basement. I said, well, if you want to improve, you got to do the same thing they have to do. So when you have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, you got to be doing a lot of babysitting. And, all the routines you can do off the court. For someone to really be good at tennis, what they should do is be doing all sorts of things to enhance athletic ability and go very slowly developing a technical base. I got one other handout we can go through. But what closing comments do you have? I'll read the last one, but you've heard it all, our listeners.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of my favorite mind vitamins was, going back to that, is Roger Crawford, Attitude Fitness. Give yourself a daily checkup from the neck up. I always love that one. I think I use it consistently in my life, both to myself and then telling other people, because it's so important to take inventory of your own life and, just on a daily basis, give yourself that checkup from the neck up, because Attitude Fitness is critical. It's the catalyst for everything.
Yeah, I mean, really with stroke production, I'm telling people all the time, you really can't teach technique if you can't teach character. And you're not going to learn forehands and backhands if you don't have character. But for our listeners, go back. We interviewed Roger. Roger's got a couple books. Trying to think of the drug in the 1950s that women took short term and a lot of cramps during pregnancy, and a lot of kids ended up being malformed. And he had half a foot, half a leg, and on one hand 2 fingers, and the other hand 1 finger. Played tennis, Division I tennis, had a winning record at number 6, Division I. Obviously, you were there when he visited, right?
Yeah, I had the privilege of picking him up from the Tyler Pounds Airport.
There you go. So, yeah, Roger Federer. And I should say Roger Crawford. Roger Crawford got to meet Roger Federer. But yeah, I'll go PG-13, get myself in trouble. Maybe we'll have to edit this. One of those, 1,543, is this is Borth from the locker room. Locker room power. I'm going to look that up. I told a young man, we won't mention anybody's name, but I said, "You're so lazy you'd marry a pregnant woman." That might be one of my few lines that could have made it all the way to the movies. But here's one. Now, I get emotional reading this, but this is in it. I'll go quick. The habit poem. This needs to be on any kid with competitive goals. It should be on the refrigerator. I'm your constant companion. I'm your greatest helper or heaviest burden. I will push you onward or drag you down to failure. I'm completely at your command. Half the things you do, you might as well turn them over to me, and I will do them quickly and correctly. I am easily managed. You must be firm with me. Show me exactly how you want something done, and after a few lessons, I will do it automatically. I'm the servant of great people, and alas, of all failures as well. Those who are great, I have made great. Those who are failures, I have made failures. I'm not a machine, though. I work with the precision of a machine, plus the intelligence of a person. You may run me for profit or run me for ruin. It makes no difference to me. Take me, train me, be firm with me, and I'll place the world at your feet. Be easy with me, and I will destroy you. Who am I? I am habit. I think that's a good one to end on.
Yeah, that's a great one.
38
Powerful.
years. 38 years.
Yep.
Congratulations. February.
Thank you.
Got married on Valentine's Day, huh?
February 12th. It was a Friday. Church was the 14th. We were going to get married on. It fell on a Sunday. Shiloh Road Church of Christ in Tyler, Texas. And I remember getting married Friday night. Had some, a lot of you were there, Tyler Voss, a lot of my northern friends. But I, had an incredible honeymoon at the Holiday Inn in Tyler. And I remember Steve said,
You have to work the next day?
No, you gave me Saturday off. And I remember having to come in on Sunday.
He's making that up. He means 2 Sundays later. That's what he's talking about.
No, so I still got to take my wife on a honeymoon someday. But we've had some good trips then. But yeah, no, it's hard to believe it's been that long.
Yeah, I remember back in those days, Tyler, Texas was a dry county, and those boys from North Dakota, that had to be explained to them.
Yeah, they didn't know what they were walking into.
Their understanding of tennis was low to highest wealth. But
good group.
In some ways, that seems like it was yesterday, but 38 years ago. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, you get a hold of Dave Anderson, Brookhaven Tennis. Make a trip to Texas. We're in Ave Maria, Florida, and we're trying to always make plans to improve the GreatBase. The GreatBase is a system of systems. I'm sitting in a room where we're going to put up eight nice photos of the pillars we have. And certainly there's many, many people. I think of Don Leary with the word pitcher method. He's not one of our pillars, but what a great concept. But in that course, Tennis Intelligence Applied, we mentioned over 100 coaches, but we do have, we have a lot of critics, and it's just amazing. I know Andy for like 3 years, Andy Fitzell. He was brought down. It used to be Andy and Steve, and or now Steve Smith stuff is that it's not. It's like a really good handle on all of Braden's contributions to tennis, and then move on to Vandermeer and Van Horn. But no, really appreciate people that are trying to help out others through tennis, and hopefully these podcasts inspire people to look at the content and become a better player, become a better teacher. But David, thank you, and listeners, thank you. Jenna Welch. She won the lottery 38
She
years
did.
38 years ago.
She hit it big.
All right.
Yeah.
Adios, everybody. Good night.
Okay.
Thanks.
Have a good night. Thanks, Chief.
Yeah.